I urge this Congress to get together, pursue a bipartisan market-based solution to climate change, like the one John McCain and Joe Lieberman worked on together a few years ago. But if Congress won't act soon to protect future generations, I will. I will direct my cabinet to come up with executive actions we can take now and in the future to reduce pollution, prepare our communities for the consequences of climate change, and speed the transition to more sustainable sources of energy.
Now, is that how President Obama is planning to achieve his agenda through executive action? We know it can't, but Andrew, the one thing we thought after the election, right, because of the different political calculations, the Republicans wanted something like immigration, and the Democrats obviously wanted other things, that there was a potential for a grand bargain. Is it pretty much safe to say the clock's made that an impossibility at this point?
I don't know if it's the clock that's made it an impossibility. It's certainly the positions of both parties right now that I think's made it something of an impossibility. Immigration looks like it's going to be a done deal, at least some version of it. There was bipartisan support for that in the chamber last night.
Depends on the optics, though.
Well,
is this the president's thing, or is this
well, it also depends on what
thing?
specifically is in there. It's going to wind up being the president's immigration package, no matter how it gets presented. I mean, I can't see how the Republicans are going to wind up taking credit for whatever passes on immigration. The rest of what the president, I think, was proposing is going to have to be through primarily executive order, because I just don't see nearly anything that he put in the State of the Union last night getting through, particularly the House. I mean, the $9 minimum wage, let's take that as an example. That's not even going to get a debate. I mean, that's dead in the water. So the president can do what he can with executive order, but.
Well, let's talk about sequester, because that's going to be the next fight here. And I'm sure when the guys walked out of it, you know, they were already getting ready for the fight. And I'll start with you, Congresswoman. What do you think the lines of at least the debate will be? Because Republicans don't want steep cuts as it relates to defense here. President doesn't want steep cuts as it relates to items like the social safety net and obviously submarining the economy just as it begins to get going. But how many members in the Republican Party say, let it go? You know, let's go over here. You know what? I may not like all of it. I may not like defense, but at least we get what we want. Real steep cuts here that'll cut the deficit. How many aren't afraid of the consequences of the sequester, you think?
Well,
more than we think?
I don't think anybody takes the consequences of the sequester lightly. But I think the attitude is one that we've reached this point in our history at which we have got to act and act in ways that all of us, one thing that the sequester did per force was feature elements that everybody dislikes.
Because let me just tell you, if I was advising Republicans, I'd say they've been playing defense since really after the primary, with the exception of that terrible debate that the president had. With the exception of that, they've been playing defense. I happen to think it'd be terrible for the economy and terrible for the country if we went over yet another cliff. However, this is the best leverage they have. If they're willing to take the consequences, the president's got, I think he'll blink. Richard, I think he'll blink.
50% of the sequester is defense, which these cuts are the Democratic model for cuts.
But time out. I believe that there are legitimate people who believe in the Republican Party today that even though they won't like the cuts and they think it will harm defense, that it's overall more important to cut the bottom line. I truly believe this.
Was acting carefully yesterday. That chant, give us a vote, is what he's going to say about minimum wage. It's what he's going to say about defense cuts. It's what he's going to say about additional revenue from tax reform. And what he's really saying to the Republicans is, you're going to either be defined by your right-wing extreme, or you're going to come back and with enough votes and the Democrats, we're going to get some stuff done. And if you don't, the election in 2014 may be the election in which you lose the majority. But what happens before then,
Richard? The point is, there's a date and there's a number. This isn't some theoretical conversation.
Doesn't happen like that, Richard. The sequester goes into effect and it unfolds over months. There's no cliff here.
But the impact as it relates to the markets,
it's a bungee jump.
You know what happens, the impact as it relates to the markets. That's more immediate, okay? We also know,
I think that's built in. I think you're likely to see it happen.
And the sequester came, the president was the father of the sequester, really. I mean, when it comes right down to it, because the negotiations regarding the debt ceiling in that summer came to a halt because the president insisted on revenue provisions that the House Republicans in particular found onerous for sound economic reasons, I would say. So the sequester really is the president's, in a sense, it's the president's.
Well, if he was the father, doctor, then somebody had to mother it, and everybody was complicit.
He's been waiting to use that line. But Vince, here's my thing. Just humor me and agree that the political price, long term or even medium term, will be paid by Republicans if this thing goes through. I'm sure the president will take a hit for it. But just for this conversation, humor me that that's the consequence.
I don't completely disagree with that. I think what the Republicans need to find somewhere in the compromise is an overall narrative that they're going to be able to sell, whether it's to the conservative base, to the moderates. They're going to have an overall political narrative that works for them. And the reality about dates, well, that is going to be difficult. That's why guys like me get paid big bucks to come up with that. And the problem is, and you're right, sequester will take a while, but there are dates imposed, whether they're political dates, whether they're imposed by the media, whether that's what gets us all on TV talking about, there are going to be dates imposed, whether they're real or not. And this goes back to what I said about the fiscal cliff before the end of the year, and I was actually on the show, and I said, you know what, the Republicans should have the guts to do nothing, go over the cliff, take the short-term hit, and then long-term, they would be okay for it. They would actually come out okay in the long term. Now, obviously that's not what they did, but then from the other side, what they should have considered is give in on the millionaire's tax, but you can't bring it down to something unreasonable like $200,000, $250,000 a year. You have to move that number closer to a real millionaire's tax. Give on that, and then show the compromise and take ownership of solving the fiscal cliff. I wasn't advising him, I can tell you that. But yeah, at the end of the day, that was a huge misstep by the Republicans because they lost the issue completely.
I think the president
they gave way too much
would
and they lost the entire
actually
issue.
want to do some form of entitlement reform. I mean, he won't tell his base that. But I think
He told them last night.
with as vague as you can do it, but maybe you're right. Maybe that was
it was vague.
He's the one
it was
who's going
vague.
to have to lead that.
Yeah, I think
But-
you're
It
right.
was said in good terms where he could wiggle his way out of whatever he needs to go.
Now, when we come back, we will talk about the drink of water heard around the world here, the rebuttal, and listen, Marco.
Sponsored by Poland Spring.
Very nicely done here. We will talk about not just Marco Rubio, but also a second rebuttal that maybe not a lot of people heard, but really speaks to some of the inherent challenges that the Grand Old Party's got to figure out here and figure out sooner than later. Stay with us.